Is it possible I can talk with no microphone? Is that going to be okay? Can you guys hear me pretty good? Everybody hear me good back there? Okay. My name is Raj Mehta, like she mentioned, and I want to say how honored I am to be here in front of everyone. FAN is my family. Okay, it's very important. Families Against Narcotics is a place that I can go to share what I've been through. For a long time, when I first got sober, I do all kinds of presentations at high schools and colleges, right? And I would do presentations on addiction, what is addiction, addiction prevention. I would not disclose my story, okay? It isn't until I did my TED Talk at U of M I disclosed my own personal story and kind of came out of the closet, as you could say. And the reason why I did that was because a couple moms, one mom in Fan, and one woman named Jeannie Richards said, Raj, you gotta share your story. I said, I don't feel comfortable because I don't want people to be misled and think a certain way or view me a certain way. And they go, you gotta do it to fight the stigma. I'm like, all right. And I'm pretty smart. I listen to moms, not in the old days, but in my recovery, right? I'm pretty intelligent. I listen to moms, and I began doing that. And when I came out and began talking about, who I am and what I've been through, I'm also a recovering heroin addict, okay, off the streets of Detroit, who crawled across the ghetto of broken glass to actually turn their lives around and become something in this world. I went on to graduate school at U of M Ann Arbor, graduated with the 4.0. I'm a master's level licensed therapist with the state of Michigan, and I'm a therapist and counselor. And I also do a thing called interventions. Has everyone seen a TV program, Intervention, before? Okay, so you might know that people that have a drug problem may not be very keen about the idea of having a drug problem. Is that making sense? There's a term called denial for that. Anyone hear this term called denial? So I meet with moms and dads all the time. And one of the things that I hear before I do an intervention for a family is they say explicitly, they're never going to rehab. Well, and so at that point I can say, well, clearly this intervention will not work, and so nice to meet you and call it a day. So why do we not hear that? Why do we, as people that are trying to fight addiction, don't hear when someone says, I'm never going to rehab, I can never get clean? Why is that something we can't actually listen to? Yeah, because it ties into stigma and it gets rid of hope. This is very important. There's a lot of pain in this room. I've lost people that are very close to me through addiction as well. And I lost my close friend, became the godfather of his son. I swear to you, if I could come in here and take all your pain for you, I would do it. I'd do it right now in a heartbeat. But those that understand when you've lost someone that you really love and care about dearly to this disease, please use that as fuel for your fire. Be defiant, right? It's important that we realize that a heroin and an addiction bomb went off in our communities and everybody got knocked down. And so you look around, like a heroin bomb went off, like all these people have died and become addicted. You look in this room and why aren't the seats all filled? I mean, I want to thank and respect everybody for being here today, but there should be like 10,000 more people in this room. And not to be mean, I'm not judging anybody, but the reason why they aren't in this room is they don't have the courage that you guys have. And that's just a fact. You guys are the lions in our community. You guys are the people that are saying we're fed up. It's great to be a stakeholder. I can sit around and be a stakeholder. But showing up and suiting up is how you make this kind of change happen. And addressing the issue and being honest that we're not going to take it anymore. A heroin bomb went off in our communities and it's killing our kids. Think about the term community, the focus on common unity. What do we have in common with each other? Well, I always hear in America, the focus is on children. We don't want our children to have drug and alcohol problems. We want our children to live in safe schools. We want our children to be able to reach their full potential. Well, that being said, if children are very important to us, how do you think addiction feels about your children? Oh, I can't wait to get his hands on them, right? Addiction is this killer that wants to destroy them. And by the way, like in a really bad movie with a demon in it, addiction doesn't want to just kill your kid quickly, right? Addiction wants to drag this out and make the entire family cry, make everybody cry and suffer through the process. And that's why I respect and thank everybody for being here. Because just being here to talk about this and putting it out into the open reduces the stigma. We have to fight back. The Zika virus is all over TV. Isn't that true? You've seen the Zika virus? I'm a pretty intelligent guy. How many people have died in America because of Zika? I'm sorry, was a lot of rock bands, I can't hear it. That was how many people in America that died from Zika? 0. And how much money do they want to spend to fight it?
Billions.
Right. Now, Before I go any further, I want the permission from this audience to be able to be honest and candid. Because to do my job properly, I have to be able to tell you guys some facts and information. And for some people, it's going to be kind of unsettling. But my goal is to promote harmony and healing. Everybody in this room deserves to be happy and be able to heal from what they've been through and their trauma to losing people and dealing with addiction firsthand. And so you guys have heard about this war we had in Afghanistan, right? A lot of things were dropped, a lot of bombs were dropped, a lot of money was spent. How much money do you think was spent just to rebuild roads and schools and buildings in Afghanistan during that 8-year period?
Billions.
8 billion. Right, so when I hear people that tell me that we don't have any money for rehab, so I can hear people say, I'm not gonna go to rehab, I don't hear that. There's $8 billion we've spent to build them roads. God bless people in Afghanistan, but I got people that are dying trying to get into rehab, trying to get into rehab and dying and overdosing. Yeah, and I'm sick of it. The veterans courts, those programs work. The sobriety courts, those programs work. Drug courts, those programs work. Being a licensed professional, I'm supposed to use what's called evidence-based practice, which means to go into this peer-reviewed journal, read all kinds of information, and say, this works and this doesn't work. So let's go in a different direction. What doesn't work in fighting addiction? Anybody have an idea what doesn't work? Locking people up and not giving them help or education. Is that amazing? I can lock people up for 5 years and 10 years and 4 years and 8 months. When they come out, what are they gonna do?
Go right back to their old ways.
But why is that? What's that a function of? They don't have a method, thank you, they don't have a method to stay sober. You gotta have a method. And so it's very important, your point is, there are many pathways to recovery. Don't anybody tell you otherwise. I bet people that honest to God got involved with their church and got rid of their heroin problem. Swear to God it's true, right? I know people that went to AA and got rid of their heroin problem. I know guys that have an alcohol problem that went to NA and actually turned their lives around. People that go to therapy, education, healthy fitness, lifestyle. I don't mind how you do this. I don't make any money if you go to AA or NA, go to this church. I don't care how you achieve your goal. If you come into my office with tears in your eyes and say, I want to stop using heroin, I'm going to say that's fantastic. My next question is, how do you want to do that? Yeah. And if you say, I don't know, then make a suggestion, right? And if you're jumping out of an airplane, I would happen to suggest that you pull that cord on that parachute, right? I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I got some really good advice. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're talking about this disease. And so the first thing we're talking about addiction, like how did we get here? How did we get a heroin problem in suburban America?
Pills.
Can we be honest? Happened with pills. Now, I'm a lot older than lots of people that have addiction right now in the heroin world, right? So back when I was using heroin, may I be candid? Everybody was a loser. In the late 80s, everybody was on parole from Jackson. They had armed robbery backgrounds. All the girls had been molested. They were all prostitutes. The guys were pimps and drug dealers, carried guns. Everybody was a complete loser. Okay? And when you hung out with these people, you knew that they're all losers and crazy, and you're doing heroin, you got a needle in your arm, and there's all kinds of stigma and shame. And back then in the 80s, 80% of people that started using heroin had never taken an opiate pill first. That's powerful. So people that got into heroin back then smoked some weed, drank some beer, and had a connection to somebody that did heroin. And so, by the way, if you had some mean intentions, you're trying to create addiction in your community, what would you do to a person to cause them to become a heroin addict? Let's go in the bad direction. What's the goal? Childhood, how should it be? Horrible childhood. Physical, mental, and sexual abuse, right? Let's throw in some poverty and some racism. What else can cause damages that cause addiction?
Lack of education.
Lack of education. How about low self-esteem, low self-confidence, right? Let's also add in a genetic predisposition. How about that? Is that making sense? And so back then, the pathway to heroin addiction was being part of a deviant group of people. You knew you were all deviant, you were outsiders, you were outcasts, and that was part of that world. So what happened in the late 90s that changed the entire heroin game? Anybody have a theory on that? Yeah, one pill in particular from Purdue Pharma, a privately held corporation. They manufactured a pill called Oxycontin. And what did they do to get this pill all over the place? They didn't play by the rules anymore. What did they do? It was a Schedule II narcotic. They went into all these doctors' offices, especially in West Virginia, lots of coal miners, good insurance, lots of injuries, right? And what they say to the doctors?
Not addictive.
This is not as addictive and it has an anti-abuse mechanism. You can't abuse this pill. And they were convicted in federal court. They lied, made false graphs and false charts, right? And they got this drug being prescribed like crazy. Is that amazing?
I just read it in children.
So we can camp on that. So the FDA has approved the use of Oxycontin for people under the age of 18. I'm being very sarcastic right now because everybody knows how many little kids needed some effing Oxycontin, right? And their moms were crying, like, why can't you give my daughter some Oxycontin? She's 8 years old, her teeth pulled, and you're like, oh my God, you're so right. And so those benevolent people at Purdue Pharma said, we're gonna get this approved for the ages of under 18. By the way, what's the goal to get people started on a drug before 18? Why is that an important goal? You're grooming them and you're setting up for lifelong addiction, right? Because you're never gonna forget that. That's called euphoric recall. When you're a 12-year-old kid and your mom hands you Oxycontin because your belly hurt, and you go, wow, Mom, this pill really made my belly hurt go away, right? That's all I'm saying. There was no reason to ever approve Oxycontin for under the age of 18. We got morphine for that. We got Dilaudid for that. We even got fentanyl for that. That wasn't a non-problem. Is that making sense what I'm saying? And so Purdue Pharma changed the entire game. All of a sudden we had all these pills available. And as that began to happen simultaneously, Vicodin prescriptions went through the roof. So right now America is 5% of the world's population and we consume 99% of the world's Vicodin. That's amazing. And 8% of the world's Oxycontin. And so what happened in all these schools and high school kids and college kids who had sports injuries or had friends that had these pills, parents' medicine cabinets were filled with these pills, right? People began eating these Vicodins and these Oxys, right? But it's very important. The Mexican cartels did not have a secret laboratory and plan this whole thing out. What happened was overprescribing, overprescribing, overprescribing. And then the DEA kind of began to put a little bit of the brakes on that. And all of a sudden it's harder to get the pills, right? And where do people end up going to deal with their opiate addiction? Yeah, because bang per buck, heroin is so much more effective, right? Oxycontin is very expensive, about $1 a milligram. Comes about $28,000 per ounce. And gold is what per ounce? 1,200? That's deep. So watch this. America always talks about value, right? Gold is our standard of wealth throughout the world. I can go anywhere in the world with gold and say, hey, can you realize what this is? They're like, yeah, that's valuable, right? So if the ounce of gold is $1,200 and an ounce of raw heroin is $7,000, what's that tell you about heroin and Oxycontin? Really, really valuable, right? We're just being honest about that. And so all of a sudden we have all this overprescribing, people from the suburbs going into the inner cities buying their drugs, right? And all of a sudden we had this opiate epidemic. And once again, because of stigma and shame, everyone went like this. No, it didn't happen. Don't talk about it. It'll just go away. And so before you know it, we had a major problem. Who is this guy El Chapo? Anybody hear about this guy El Chapo? He's on TV. We know about El Chapo.
From prison.
Huh?
He escaped from prison. He's a drug
Is he
cartel
poor?
leader.
He's a billionaire.
Billionaire.
The first drug dealing billionaire was Pablo Escobar. You might have heard of him, the Medellin cartel.
Yeah.
And they had a relationship, by the way. This was actually a connection to Pablo over there. So our El Chapo is a billionaire drug dealer. They put him in Mexico's most maximum security prison. And what happened?
He escaped.
How?
Tunneled out.
Was this a regular tunnel?
No.
It was a mile-long tunnel, right? And he had a track in it and a motor scooter. And a tunnel came up in his shower stall. When you realize, you know how hard it is to build a tunnel 1 mile long? And at the bottom of that tunnel go right into somebody's shower stall in a prison? What are the odds of that being so accurate? Anybody impressed by that tunnel? Right. Can we all agree that no matter what kind of walls we build, how many DEA agents we have, that the Mexican cartels can bring their drugs in as much as they want to?
They can.
Kind of prove a point? 1972 is when the war on drugs began under President Nixon, right? And so since 1972, the DEA has dedicated themselves to the supply side of drugs. They say, we will stop this stuff from coming in. Give us billions of dollars, we'll stop it from coming in. And so you look at evidence-based practice. Okay, what does the CIA say about the price of heroin and methamphetamine and cocaine since 1972? And adjusted for inflation, what's the truth? Heroin is cheaper now, cocaine is cheaper now, meth is cheaper now than 1972. So our conclusion can be, what about interdiction and the supply side prevention? It doesn't work. Anyone want to guess how many employees El Chapo has? What impressed you? Throw a number out.
2,000.
Huh?
2,000.
150,000 people in the world work for El Chapo. Is that impressive? How many aunts and uncles and cousins and relatives do each one of those people have? Mexico is a narco state. Mexico is not a real country. It's a narco state controlled by a series of cartels that makes drugs for American drug users. 8% of all the drugs that come into America come from the Sinaloa drug cartel. El Chapo is in charge of that. Why does Raj want El Chapo dead? Well, it's very personal. Because El Chapo specializes in a very special kind of heroin cut with fentanyl. Anybody ever hear about this heroin cut with fentanyl? What's bad about this particular type? It kills everybody. And it's heartless. And someone said in a meeting, they go, well, Raj, that doesn't make any sense. Why would a drug dealer sell the kind of heroin that kills people? That's a really bad business model. And I said, well, it would be in a normal world, but in a world where the consumers just keep lining up for more of it, and you don't care about killing people, it's not really a problem. But it is for me. I don't like that. That's unacceptable. At a certain point, we have to realize that these cartels are not going anywhere. They control the Mexican government. We're not going to stop this on the supply side. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Just being honest.
Yeah.
So with regards to addiction, to break down stigma, we have to talk about the disease model of addiction. If I was to ask you guys, why is addiction a disease? What would your response be? What's our criteria for a disease? Symptoms, right? And also treatable. So if I have the flu, the influenza virus, and I come to you guys and you're a doctor and I say, look at me, my symptoms. You're like, yeah, boom. You have the influenza virus. I go, what can we do about this? Oh, we can treat this, right? So when a person has addiction, what are the symptoms of addiction?
Crying.
Crying, cravings, right? How about the 3 C's? Thank you, Amber. Cravings for the drug when you shouldn't be taking it. Everyone told you don't do that anymore. You promised you wouldn't do that anymore, and you're doing it again. Cravings. What about control? People say, the problem with heroin is you shouldn't use it every day. I love that one. So the goal is to use heroin only on the weekends and be a weekend warrior, right? So trying to control when we use is a sign of addiction, because normal people don't worry about when they drink their beer, right? I'm having a beer today, I haven't even thought about tomorrow. People that have a drug problem or an alcohol problem are like, I promised myself just 5 today, gotta stop at 5 today. No one else has an internal dialogue like that. So we have cravings to use, trying to control our usage, but what's the worst C of all? Ties into what you just said. Tears, consequences, crying moms, crying dads, crying employers, right? When addicts get high, other people cry. I'll prove that point. I was at Brighton Hospital for 3.5 years, and I would do intakes for people all the time, right? The guy comes into my intake and he's there, wife's out in the hallway, right? The guy's a hotshot lawyer and he says, I shouldn't be here, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm like, wow, man, that's an amazing accident to be here like randomly, you know? But who's out in the hallway? He's like, that's my wife. I go, how about we bring her in and ask her a few questions? How do you feel about that? I can bring her on in. So guess what question I asked the wife to determine whether or not her husband is an alcoholic?
Does his drinking affect her?
Yeah, that would be a good one, right? I want to make it even simpler than that. Watch this, to make the tears, right? Please describe your husband's drinking. Boom, face full of tears, can't even talk, liver quivering like this, right? Guess what I say to the guy? Welcome to Brighton Hospital, you're an alcoholic. How dare you? How dare me? I can ask 100 women that question, they're not going to cry. The one that has the tears in her eyes has the alcoholic or addicted husband. Is that making sense? If I ask you about your drug usage and your mom doesn't cry, is he even using drugs? You may not be an addict, right? It's not always true, but you can see my point. There's consequences to using. So the problem with addiction, it is a disease. And someone said, well, Raj, here's a problem with your model. What about testable? You can actually do like a test to see if they're an alcoholic or an addict. Well, it's amazing because like if you have a severe migraine, they can scan your brain and see nothing wrong with your brain. So what about an active alcoholic? Does their brain scan differently?
Yeah.
Wow. So if addiction isn't a disease, how could it change your brain scan?
Right.
Doesn't make any sense. Remember, choosing to take drugs is the beginning point. That's obviously an issue of self-control and choice, right? If I choose to take heroin right now, that's a choice. But once my body becomes dependent on heroin and I wake up vomiting and craving heroin, it really doesn't feel like much of a choice anymore. Is that helpful to understand? And so addiction is a disease because it's got symptoms, it's treatable, and it's also even testable, right? That's also to break some stigma, talking about that. I wanted to point out also, covering the idea behind stigma. What does stigma assume as far as forms? What are some forms of stigma that affect the individual? Anybody have an idea? You got prejudice, discrimination, fear, shame, distrust, stereotypes, and reduction in social status. And does stigma come from just the inside? Does it come from the outside? I was a teen father and I was doing heroin, and people make fun of myself, and they tell my daughter, "Your dad's a junkie loser." I think that affected her growing up when she was in middle school and elementary school. "Your dad's a junkie loser. Your dad puts needles in his arms. That's what he does. Your dad does that. He's in Detroit, putting needles in his arms." How did it affect her? Being in school, focusing, right? Calling me, lunchroom, right? Social pressures and peer pressures. Where do I sit? How did it affect somebody? Good? Bad? See, the problem with addiction is that we have what's called social reproduction theory. You would think that every generation, we better than the previous generation. They call it betterment, right? So when you have an alcoholic or addict father or mother, you say to yourself, "I'll never be like that." And you make that actionable. But what actually happens in most studies when people have an alcoholic or addict father or mother?
Become just like that.
Isn't that amazing? And the ones that don't become like them have an affinity towards marrying them,
Oh, yeah.
or dating them, or being with them, right? For most people, you see someone with a needle in their arm, you might run away and go, "My God." A drunken person all the time, not working very consistently, "Oh my God." But to a person that grew up in an alcoholic or addict household, this is familiar to me on a subconscious level. This is no big deal. And by the way, maybe I can fix this person. I couldn't fix my father, I couldn't fix my mother, but maybe I can fix this person. And so this is the pathology that kind of continues the whole thing. And so stigma comes from outside and from within. It's both internal and external. It's bidirectional and reciprocal in nature. And so why stigma? Why is stigma even produced in our society? What does it do as far as a function?
Produce the shame.
Right? Mhm. And for those on the outside, it makes them feel better. Gives them someone to point to. I'm not a loser like him. Maybe I don't work, but I'm not sticking needles in my arm, right? And for the alcoholic, I'm not sticking needles in my arm. This is legal. But it's making your children cry. Doesn't matter. This is legal. My God-given right to have my beer. This is my beer. Well, right? So stigma is used to control others, express fear, allow other groups a false sense of superiority, exploit the marginalized group, alienate, and to hurt. And so the self-stigma is promoted by negative terminology. Why should we stop using terminology like junkie and crackhead and dope fiend? Why should that terminology be pushed away? Why is that similar to the N-word?
That makes people afraid to get help.
Right, right? Because there's a shame with that, there's a stigma with that. I have people come into my office that have a second or third DUI. They said, "I'm not going to go to a rehab." I said, "I understand, I'm not going to stop drinking. I'm not an alcoholic, I'm just unlucky." Well, let's go in a different direction, right? I'm going in a different direction. So here's the thing. Is consuming alcohol right now making your life better? No. Is using alcohol right now making your life worse? Well, yeah, it is. Let's base our decision on that. And for a lot of people, that's like, "Oh, cool. You're not calling me an alcoholic." No, man. I won't give you that label today. Because that label brings that shame, right? And that guilt. So I want a healthy fitness lifestyle. Remember, alcoholic is a social term. We can just throw that. Addict is a social term. It's not a medical term. Alcohol dependency disorder is a medical term. Opioid dependency disorder is a medical term. And so people don't want this term. Why is that, though, on another level? Because Imagine if I came to you guys and said, I have a drug problem. What do you guys expect me to do? Get help and stop using drugs, right? So I have to tell you that I have a depression problem, or a gambling problem, or a wife problem, right? To avoid getting help. So addicts feel bad because they have hurt others and have hurt themselves. They feel simultaneously like the victims and like the perpetrators. They begin to take on their label criminal and act it out. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I meet a lot of people on a daily basis, and my first question that I ask them when they come to me with a DUI or an MIP or with a drug possession charge, I ask them this question: if you're not using drugs and alcohol, what are the odds of you being arrested? Why do we ask that question?
So that they can see that their use is what leads to the
Thank
criminal.
you. And they say 0. And I said, here's the bad news for you, buddy. You're not a criminal. Because if you were a criminal, you'd say, Raj, even when I'm not high or drunk, I'll break your nose and steal your shit. I want criminals to go to jail. I want addicts and alcoholics to get help. And 8% of the time that they're actually not even criminals. A study showed that amongst heroin addicts that got sober for 1 year, they self-reported and from looking at the legal records, had committed no crimes that entire time. How does a person go from committing a felony every day and stealing things every day and lying every day to getting sober and stopping that on a dime? Is that person really a criminal?
Right.
Right. And so we got 2.2 million people in jail or in prison right now. That's more than any other country in the world. That's more than China and India combined. And 8% of those people are alcoholics and addicts, which means that 8% of those people are fixable. And that's deep. So having them sitting around there, let's take away the humanitarian aspect. Say we don't even care about people, all we care about is dollars. It's going in a different direction. What's bad about having 2.2 million people sitting in prison right now?
They're on our dime.
Right? Who's paying for that?
We are.
Right. And so for the small community of for-profit prisons and the guards and the judges and the lawyers that make a lot of money doing that stuff, but for the general economy, it's a drain on us, right? People that are in jail and prison don't pay taxes. And if you really are a capitalist, you want them out of there and working, right?
Yeah.
Not being mean, but I'm just making a point. Take away the humanitarian aspect. And besides, remember, this is America. Woven throughout our fabric is the idea that people can change. This is the country of second chances. So how do we come to the point where everybody in America gets viewed from this criminal lens? Because the symptoms and behaviors involved in active addiction and alcoholism are being criminalized. There's a judge in Oakland County that was sentencing everybody to jail on their first DUI for 30 days. Okay? Anybody have an idea how that would work out for those people? Did it
Ruin their lives.
Did it stop them from drinking?
They ruin their lives.
80% of them got a second DUI. 80% recidivism rate. Go to a different judge. Gives nobody jail time on their first DUI, but lots of AA, lots of therapy, right? 20%. Wow. I wish that putting people in cages would stop people from using drugs and alcohol. I wish it was that simple. We put everybody in a cage and someone said, we'll just put them all on probation. Right? Well, I guess that would be simple. Take all the alcoholics and addicts and say from henceforth, you are on lifelong probation. Like, wow, I'm never going to use it again, right? Is it that simple? You got to have a method. All right, so let's bring this to another level here. Addicts are not bad people who need to get good. They are sick people who need to get well. And 8% of these people are not criminals. This is very important. I want to cover the stigma of being a therapist or an addiction counselor, okay? This is very important because people kind of don't notice that, when I meet with people, there's like, well, you're an addiction counselor. Well, I don't mind being called that, but one time I had a guy call me on the phone. This was really kind of awkward. And so I don't like to share this story, but he calls me on the phone. He goes, I need your help. I'm like, all right, cool, bet. What's going on? He goes, my dad, told me to call you. I got your phone number from somebody else, and they say you can help me. Well, what are you doing? He goes, I'm doing heroin every day. I go, well, I used to use heroin too, and I'm a therapist and I'm an addiction counselor, and I can help you. He goes, well, my dad told me to ask you a question before we go any further. I'm like, okay. He goes, are you one of those like poor therapists, like poor addiction counselors that drives like a really shitty car and can't do anything else but like be an addiction counselor? I'm like, wow. He goes, my dad told me never take advice from a poor person. I was like, no shit, right? And I go, well, I drive a $100,000 CLS 550 with an AMG package on it, but I didn't 4 years ago. But and I'm thinking, and by the way, Paris Hilton's really rich, and so is Kim Kardashian. I would never take any advice from those two people. Do you know what I mean? Not at all, like zero advice. See, being poor and having good advice are not mutually exclusive. And even the therapists are stigmatized, and they're like, well, he can't do anything else. He's got a record, you know. Really? No, I don't have an adult record. I have a juvenile record. I have no adult record. And, you know, addiction therapists, and they can't work in a legitimate workplace, because that's what they do there. No, I can do all kinds of things, right? I choose to be a person that works with people with addiction. Isn't that amazing that even the people that do the helping are stigmatized as being like on the margins of society? You know, how do we become like marginalized like that as well? I never saw it from that perspective, you know? Kid came into my office, and he was talking about marijuana. He's 15 years old. He gets really sensitive about marijuana. It's really weird. And so I'm like, you know, telling him that marijuana is going to cause him all these problems. And I'm out talking this kid because I should. He's 15, I'm not. And I'm out talking to him. Every angle he's got to get that angle covered, right? And a certain amount, he goes, Mom, I can't stand talking to this guy. He used to put needles in his arm. I can't talk to people put needles in their arm. Like, wow, really? That's your go-to thing? When all of a sudden you have no other argument why marijuana is making your life not better anymore, or you can't even make your bed when you smoke pot? You want to be like Bob Marley? You can't even write a song, right? Not being mean, but you aren't Bob Marley. And the idea is to put that stigma. Well, he used to put needles in his arm. Yeah, I used to do that. And I haven't done that for almost 10 years. It's also very important. I haven't used any drugs or alcohol. On May 15th of next year will be 10 years completely clean and sober. That's off of all drugs and alcohol. No Suboxone, no methadone. Remember, not closing any pathways down. It's very important. I'm not anti-methadone, anti-Suboxone. I'm anti-addiction. So what does that mean? If you have a daughter or a son who's out there, you know, overdosing and about to die, he says, I'm only going to do the Suboxone or methadone, any safe harbor in a tragic storm. You follow what I'm saying? Let's get you off the streets. Young ladies prostituting yourself on backpages.com. Suboxone, methadone, let's get you in, let's get you in. But let's go deeper. The gold standard is no drugs or alcohol. That's the gold standard. You watch the Olympics, bronze medal, Suboxone, and methadone. We're in the right direction. That's good, don't get me wrong. But the recovery process requires your brain to feel, right? You have to hurt to heal. I wish it wasn't true. I wish you go through the therapy process in a 12-step program and never feel any pain. But the idea behind actually becoming better and becoming more spiritual, you have to hurt to heal. When you have a Schedule III narcotic in your system, like Suboxone or methadone, you don't feel like that. You don't get to that level into those deep issues and get those deep feelings out. Is it helpful to understand? I'm not against them for a tool to get you in the right direction, but I'm always going to have, remember, this is families against narcotics. Not confusing, right? Families against narcotics. Not against some narcotics or ones that come from doctors, right? Against narcotics. And so, is that making sense?
Yeah.
All right. Let's bring this to the next level. What do you guys know about this fancy book right here? DSM-5. Some of you guys know what this book is. I know somebody knows what this book is. Huh? What is this book?
Diagnosis for all psychiatric disorders.
Yeah, and every single mental illness known to American kind, right, is in this book. I diagnose people, do evaluations. I don't use this book. You're going to see why in a second. This book is bought and paid for by Big Pharma. Isn't that amazing? Because you know what dependency is, right? If you have opioid dependency, your insurance will pay for Brighton Hospital. If you have alcohol dependency, your insurance will pay for Brighton Hospital, right? And so the person now has addiction, right? To meet criteria for a dependency disorder, which means that insurance will pay for you to get help. This is very important. For tolerance, 2 criteria for dependency. You must have tolerance to the drug and withdrawals when you run out. That's common sense, right? It says here, this criteria is not considered to be met for those taking opioids under the appropriate use of a medical supervisor or doctor. One more time. You can't have withdrawals if a doctor gave them to you. You can't have a tolerance if a doctor gave them to you. So my clients that have a crooked doctor go to Brighton Hospital for admissions. They're like, hey, I have a drug problem. Like, what are you taking? I'm taking Oxycontins, a whole bunch of them. I can't get off them, I need help. Well, who prescribed them to you? Well, see, he's this crooked doctor. He hangs out in strip clubs and he snorts cocaine and he gives me all these pills and he gives free breast exams to girls. Yeah, so here's the thing. Is he licensed by the state? Well, yeah, he is. Well, see, I'm so sorry. He's going to treat your addiction. But he's the problem. No, he's going to treat your addiction because, see, according to the DSM-5, you're under his care and you can't meet criteria. Why is this a bad thing? By the way, but if you can afford it, like some of my clients have their own private jet airplanes and they have a drug problem that came from a doctor. They go, Raj, where should we go? We got big dough. I go, Betty Ford Center, $30,000 cashier check. They get you 30 days in their great program. Hazelton, same thing. They drop that check down there, no problem at all. Isn't that amazing? And so back to this concept here, imagine, I hate to use this analogy, it's really offending, but I tell you, imagine if someone that you really loved went into a doctor's office, like your daughter, and they were raped. You went into a courtroom with tears in your eyes. You said, this doctor, he harmed my daughter. He ruined her life. And they pull out some dumb book and say, was she raped in the streets? Well, no, she was raped in the doctor's office. Doesn't count as rape. Like, how do you do that? How do you change the rules? Just like that. Who paid for this book, this pretty big, thick book, to change the rules on people so that you no longer can get help? Is that amazing? Imagine, like, in America, we have emergency rooms. You guys know that, right? And anybody can go in there, and they don't ask you how much money you have or if you can afford to pay. That's part of, like, being a modern society. We have people with common unity. We say to ourselves, like, I don't really know you, or I don't really know you, but if you get hit by a car, I want you to get help. And we're like, are we all cool with that? But what if you can't pay? We'll deal with that later, right? And that's how in other countries, in third world countries, you actually have a gatekeeper at an emergency room. They say, well, can you afford to pay for this treatment? They're like, no, back out on the streets. But in America, we have these open emergency rooms. Anybody can go in for help, right? So imagine this. You go to Brighton Hospital, and you say, I need to get help. I got my second DUI. And they're like, wow, so you have a court case pending? And you're like, yeah, I want to be truthful. And Brighton says what to you? Your insurance won't pay. You're on probation for your DUI, right? You drink on, true story, drink on probation because of your DUI because you have no therapy, no AA. First DUI, violate probation, you're drinking. They now order you to an IOP program. You come see Raj, right? And Raj tells the woman who's a very moral, upstanding woman, but she's not very, very poor. And I say, well, before you go to your IOP admissions appointment, you have to lie. She's like, what do you mean? I go, you have to go in there and say you have no court case at all. But Raj, I can't do that. I go, well, if you don't do that, it's going to cost you $7,000. Raj, that would never happen. They're going to understand my situation. And she goes in for her IOP appointment, right? We fill out paperwork, and they say, are you on probation? And she said, yeah. They go, your insurance won't pay for this. Yeah.
My sister, she did a breaking, she was prescription of crack, but because crack didn't kill you know, she wouldn't be able to let her in, so she had to, in order to get in there.
Yep.
She got drunk that night.
Yep.
She's not alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
In order to let her in.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Imagine you go to the emergency room in America. They change the rules with that book, right? And they say, okay, what are you doing here? Well, you know, I got lung cancer. Well, how'd you get it? Well, I was smoking cigarettes. Haha, that was a choice. You chose to smoke those cigarettes. We're not going to pay for that. Well, what if I pay cash? Come on in. Imagine you're going to the hospital, right? And you got diabetes, and you have your insulin's all out of whack, and you're falling into a coma. Like, well, hold on a second. Your son has a coma right now. They're like, yeah, but he's kind of overweight. Well, yeah. Well, he ate too many donuts. Yeah, so that was his choice. We're not going to pay for that. Can you imagine if that was the rules for other treatment for illnesses? You wouldn't put up with that kind of stuff. You put a gun to the doctor's head and say, doctor start doctoring, nurse start nursing, and whoever you are, do something over here because if not, I'm going to slash your tires. Let's get to work here. This is my loved one. When the treatment center is set up, you walk in there with your loved one and like, I'm so sorry, you know, the insurance won't pay for this. They have a court case pending. Or, I'm so sorry, it's crack cocaine. We don't consider that a dependency disorder that can be treated in an outpatient program. And we're like, all sheepish, like, well, okay, I don't want to cause any trouble here. So what does work? Talking about interventions, right? You see a TV program, intervention. People on a TV program have a 80% likelihood of getting 1 year sober. Is that impressive? 80% of people that are on the TV program intervention get 1 year clean. That's impressive, right? Well, why is that? What happens when you're on that program? What do you get as part of the program deal when you sign up
Probably
for it?
some money.
You get guaranteed 30 days of inpatient.
Oh.
Right? And so you go to different treatment centers, you might get 7, you might get 5. So parents tell me, Raj, Rehab doesn't work. My son's been there 3 times. I go, really? Yeah, 7 days, 4 days, 3 days. And I'm like, see, here's the thing. Imagine if your son had cancer. They're like, we're gonna give your son 7 chemos and that's it. You'd go crazy. You would never tolerate that, right? So they get 30 days of inpatient treatment, and most importantly, sober living for 6 months or more. Guarantee is part of the package. Everyone gets free therapy, including the family. So what does work? 30 days of inpatient treatment, sober living after that, and family involved with therapy and the person in therapy, 80%. You add Vivitrol to that equation, I can give you 90%. That's impressive, right?
Why is it so expensive?
Well, that's another issue, right? It goes back to my big pharma book, right? Be honest about that. So when talking about stigmas and addiction, we have to talk about, we're gonna go past the negative treatment stigmas. I wanna go to the social stigmas, and I kind of camped on that for a second right there. In our society, you know, because of social stigmas, even the families are stigmatized and marginalized. Let's be honest about that. People know which families have drug users in them, and they're marginalized and stigmatized. And we talk about social stigma is strengthened by the myth that addiction is a choice, right? It is immoral, sinful, and a lack of willpower. This false belief that people can only change through punishment, coercion, or incarceration fuels that stigma, right? Addiction, once you have the problem of addiction, it's no longer a choice. And so Dr. Phil was on TV. You guys know who Dr. Phil is, right? And so they had a special on heroin addiction. And I'm kind of happy. I wasn't a Dr. Phil fan, never really watched the TV show, right? So I'm watching Dr. Phil on TV, right? And a young woman who's a heroin addict, they show this little video vignette of her, you know, going to these hotel rooms and doing a few tricks, and you know, comes on, she was on stage. And mom's out there on stage, right? And Dr. Phil says this. This woman about to come onto her stage is a junkie whore who will sell her body to anyone who will pay. I can tell when she is lying, her lips are moving. She needs to do everything I tell her to do when she comes out on the stage. And the audience goes crazy. Thank you, Dr. Phil. And she comes out there with tears in her eyes. Is that therapy? Is that healing? I want to break his jaw. That's insulting. You have no idea what that woman has been through. All the shit that she's been through. And she comes on the stage asking you for help. You treat her like a piece of shit or you bully her? Are you kidding me? But the audience applaud. That plays right into that stigma, right? She's none of those things. She's somebody's sister, somebody's future wife, somebody's daughter. You need to treat her like that. Stop treating people with addiction problems like they're less than other people. And don't tolerate it in your own communities anymore. These words need to go away, right? Because these words are powerful and they can either harm or they can heal. I want to talk about the structural stigmas. We're going to kind of finish up on this, all right? You guys are aware that institutions, organizations, and policies can promote and support the inaccurate views of people with chemical dependency and allows the marginalized groups, the addicts, to be ostracized, lose their civil rights, and be mistreated without consequences. And so, once again, I tell my clients before they go off to rehab, oftentimes I tell them to lie. I want them to get help. You might say, Raj, you're a really bad guy. You tell your clients to lie. Let me tell you a little story. If I told you I robbed a pharmacy with a gun, you'd say I'm a horrible person. But I said, hold on a second, let me give you the details. My sister has AIDS. We can't afford the AIDS medication. If I don't give her that medicine, she'll die. You might think of me a little bit different. So before you think of me as a bad person for telling people to lie to get help, begin to question, why should anyone have to lie to get help? Don't put that on me. My job as a social worker is to disobey things that kill people, right? And not hear nonsense. That doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to hear that. I fight for my clients. I fight against addiction, right? And it takes a toll on me too, trust me. It allows the government and different agencies to not pay for treatment, right? Because it was a choice. They chose to do that. Too many donuts, too many cigarettes. That was your choice. We're not going to pay for that. It allows insurance companies to deny or restrict coverage for treatment services in ways that would not be tolerated for any other kind of illness. Insurance will not pay for rehab if you have a court case. Doesn't that blow your mind? But it gets even worse, right? It promotes jail and prison as methods to help instead of inpatient, outpatient educational services. It allows even a Good Samaritan law, which allows a person to call for help with no legal consequences, to not apply for illegal drugs in Michigan. You guys are aware of that, right? It's still illegal to call for help because they might pin you a felony drug charge for being there in the vicinity. And so many people die because they're afraid to call for help. That needs to stop. Now, people talk about Narcan and Narcan shots. Yes.
If someone's staying in the emergency room and they're overdosing on an illegal drug, are
Yeah.
they charged with drug possession?
They have been in some states. They have been sometimes.
Yeah, isn't that a bunch of crap?
Yes, it's insane. They got rid of it for alcohol because every year in the college campuses, the people would not call for help, their friends would die, and parents got fed up, and so they got the law passed for alcohol first. But it doesn't apply to illegal drugs in Michigan.
Big bluff.
Yeah. The question is why though? What's wrong about having an America where the common unity, the community comes first, second chances come first? Remember, I was brought back to life 14 times from Narcan. I don't say it to brag, but I was written off. I was that junkie loser that we talk about in the stigma handout here. I wasn't supposed to be anything. And now I think I'm somebody kind of good. I mean, help a lot of people. I speak the truth. My brain's not completely fried. You know what I mean? Slightly. But I can still make some good points while I'm talking, right?
Right.
And so who's to tell me that, but who's to say the 15th Narcan shot, that's nope, you give him 14, that's it. We give him 12, no, that's the last one he gets. Same thing with rehab, you only get one chance, right? If you had cancer, you get one chemotherapy run, that's it. It's stigma in politics, that's what you guys talking about. People convicted of drug crimes, like personal possession, you guys know how this works, right? In Michigan, any drug besides marijuana, 0 to 50 grams is a felony. You guys understand that, right? One Adderall in your pocket that belongs to somebody else is a felony. The residue of cocaine on somebody's mirror in the back of your car is a felony. Shouldn't a felony mean something?
Yeah.
They're handing out felonies like candy. So what's bad about a community of all these young people that have felonies and drug charges and they begin to believe what about themselves?
Yeah.
I tell my clients, don't believe your own hype. When I get into that, I'm gonna do it. You're not that. I'm gonna speak, you're not that. You are a drug user who got caught using drugs. You are a future college student. You are a future father. You're a future husband. Yes.
You know what irritates me about that is, I worked with a young man in a warehouse, and his doctor overprescribed his vitamins on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I refer to them as chemical slaves,
Right.
people that are addicted.
Yeah.
And legal slave owners.
Right.
Are the doctor.
Mhm.
And illegal slave owners are people that are selling your vitamins to their friends.
Right.
And that's what he was doing because he didn't have medical coverage.
Mm-hmm.
His doctor deliberately overprescribed these, and he was selling them. People were aware of it, and it was like, oh, it's like,
Yeah.
it's an opiate. And he's going, and I said, Todd, you know where you're going? Just one time, one of your buddies gets caught with this vitamin
Yeah.
that he doesn't have a prescription for. You're going up the river, big time, just like a heroin.
Remember, but back in the days, though, people that were in the opiate groups and that got possession of drug charges were all marginalized. They were all losers. And now all of a sudden, we have they're handing out these felonies like candy. They should mean something. I personally say this out loud, you shouldn't get any felony drug charge under 50 grams. That's personal usage. Doesn't make any sense to ruin somebody's life to possess one pill one time for the rest of their life and have no good job. It's very important. People convicted of drug crimes, right, cannot get student loans. You guys know this. This is powerful. You can shoot somebody in the head. You can cut the heads off of puppies. You can molest children and still get a federal loan for school, for college. Are you aware of that? But under certain drug possession charges, you might never get a federal student loan. Why is that even a thing? Going deeper. If you get caught with drugs, you lose your license for 6 months. Yeah, felony charge possession, lose your license for 6 months. You can kill somebody, molest some children, and never lose your license. Why is that a thing? I'm asking you guys rhetorically, why do we take away the license of a person that's caught with personal possession amounts of drugs and then tell them, go to NA, go to therapy, go to your meetings, go to your counselor, go to your church? They're set up to fail. They are a marginalized, stigmatized group. And when you're honest about it, what society is telling those people, because I was one of those people, we don't give a shit about you. Figure it out on your own.
Yep.
And without a system, without people in a support system that said, we are fed up, that's stupid, doesn't serve the greater good. Remember, in the reading that you made, the reading was so touching, to have the idea that we're gonna judge our judges, not based upon their ability to punish people, but based upon their ability to rehabilitate people. What are you doing to make my community better? Don't tell me how you lock everybody up that got a drug charge. That's stupid, unsophisticated. I'm not impressed with that. How'd you help that young man get back on the track to recovery? How'd you help that woman get into rehab? How'd you get her into the sobriety court program? You follow what I'm saying? And tying this into it, receiving a felony conviction prevents people from gainful employment. It drives people with felony convictions into the underground economy.
Yeah.
Whether it is drug dealing, prostitution, topless dancing, being a bookie, or working under the table, it destroys hope and alienates people from legitimate work opportunities. These types of jobs further fuel the cycle of addiction. The system does more damage to the person with addiction than the drugs do.
Yep.
They asked this African-American professor who grew up in a very tough area of Chicago. He's a very well-read and well-spoken man. They asked him, why are you so successful? How come all your friends went in and out of prison? Most of them ended up getting killed and ended up dying, becoming drug addicted. You know what he said? I didn't get caught. My record was clean. I could get a student loan because I had no drug charges. I got a federal loan for school. Never got caught. What? That's the difference. Remember, because we're families against narcotics. You know, we are the hope group. Hope springs eternal. Woven in the fabric of our America, we see second chances in people, right? Everybody in this room knows someone that deserves those second and third and fourth chances. This is spiritual warfare. And there's going to be people out there that are going to tell you, no, we can't afford it. There's no money for it. $8 billion in Afghanistan? Oh, sorry about that. You changed the rules in the big pharma book. Oh, but see, that's because it doesn't make any sense. Keep asking why. Keep asking why. I want to thank everybody for their time and the opportunity to speak. It's my honor to be of service to everybody in this room. God bless.
Thank you.